Hey everybody, your old pal Jeff Urbin here, live from the Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum in a whole brand new year, 2024. Thanking you for returning, hoping you had a nice holiday season. We are delighted to have you here, joining us again for a Jeff Live presentation via the technology. So thanks for tuning in. Today we are going to talk about gifts. Okay, so as we sit here today, and I know this is being recorded, so you might see this another time, but we've just finished up the holiday season. And of course, the holiday season is supposed to be a time of joy and togetherness and peace and hope and all of that. But you can't get away from the fact that there's also tons and tons and tons of gift giving. And sometimes you get good gifts, sometimes you get not so good gifts. If you get a not so good gift, that's called a regift, and you give that to somebody else. And what eventually happens is it all settles down, and you then start to do your thank you notes. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, in the spirit of gifts, we're going to talk a little bit about the Roosevelt and some of the Roosevelts, I should say, and some of the gifts that were given to the Roosevelts and are here in the Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum here in Hyde Park. Now, I'm going to show you mostly pictures because the objects, of course, are now priceless artifacts, having belonged to the president and having been given to the president. But the idea here is to give you a sample of the kinds of things that we have in our collection, and sort of the wide variety of what we have there. We also have a couple of reproductions that I'll show and hold up and show for you, so you'll see some things 3D as well. Okay, so first of all, let's start off talking about this idea of gifts to heads of state or gifts to leaders of countries. This is a tradition that goes way back, way back. And the idea was that if you wanted to make friends with another country, if you wanted to make friends, let's say, with a potential ally, or you wanted to make peace with a former enemy, one of the ways you could do this would be to present them with a gift. So this became a very important tradition in diplomacy, going way back. So, it would be one of these sorts of things where you say, okay, hey, other guy, let's get together here and try to, get some commerce going here and try to get some peace going here. And because I want to make you feel welcome, I'm going to give you a gift from myself, from my tribe, from my country, from my organization. And what these did was help to solidify the feeling of goodwill and the feeling of friendship. Now, when the United States of America, became our own country, we wanted to sort of get away from some of that olden day sort of way things that were done back in the old world. We were a brand new democracy, a brand new country. And, sometimes these gifts, they were given in friendship, of course, but they were also given with the expectation that maybe they were gaining some favor, maybe they were gaining some advantage. So when we became a country, George Washington was like, well, I think we're going to try to do away with some of that, right? We're going to get away from some of that accepting gifts and stuff, because we want to be judged. We want to build a relationship in the world based upon our values, based upon what we have to offer as the new United States of America. We don't want to be accepting gifts that are going to then, make us beholden to other countries and to other leaders and those sorts of things. Well, that went really well until May of 1789, when George Washington received the very first presidential gift. And it was a portrait of little twins that had been born, a little boy twin and a little girl twin, and their parents had named them George and Martha. And this was given, this little portrait, to President Washington. And of course, how do you turn down a gift like that was, honoring you and your wife? And so in the ensuing decades that happened after that, ordinary citizens began to feel quite comfortable in giving gifts to the president. And it was understood that the not accepting gifts from other countries was impolite. Right, and was really such an established part of diplomatic norms around the world that we really began to have to take these things on. Most of the gifts that were given were displayed or stored away, or sometimes given to charities, those sorts of things. So this is how gift giving became an important part of diplomacy, and how we end up getting this giant pile of gifts that we have in our collection. Some of the gifts I'm going to share with you today fall into what I would call the icky category. Some of the gifts fall into what I would call gifts from famous people category. I'm going to show you a couple of gifts from state. We'll talk a little bit about some of the gifts the President and Mrs. Roosevelt gave. And then we're going to focus primarily on unusual gifts from ordinary people. Now, when President Roosevelt first took office, in his inauguration, he accepted the presidency as a gift. He said, I accept this gift given to me by the people. So this idea of the people giving something to the president, and then, the president accepting that and entering into this relationship, is something that was very important for President Roosevelt. And so, he understood this, and these gifts started coming in. So let's start off with some of the ickier gifts in our collection. Now, icky, of course, is a subjective term. I'm using it here to describe things such as this, and I will focus in on that for you. If I can find my remote. There it is. Okie dokie, let me do that. Okay. And what this is, ladies and gentlemen, is a mastodon tooth. And this was given to the president. It's a large mastodon tooth. It has 5 cusps, if you count the cusps right there. And it sits on a rectangular marble base with a little plaque here given to the president. And this mastodon tooth was unearthed in Colombia, and it was presented to the president by the leader of Bogota in 1934. And it's thought that these mastodons have not existed in over 10,000 years. So this was a pretty kind of cool and unusual gift given to the president. I put it in the icky category because mastodons were not known for their oral hygiene. Right? I'm pretty sure they did not have a dental policy or a dental program, and so you can bet that this ground up a lot of red meat in its day, and to me, that seems a little bit on the icky side. The next thing we have coming up is a very unusual thing, and this is, in fact, an assassin's bullet. And this is an assassin's bullet. It's here in a case. It was given to the president. Now, a lot of people don't realize that what happened was that back in the day, you were elected in November, and you didn't take office until, usually March the next year, right? So you were elected in November, whoops, and you took, sorry about that, wrong key there. So you were elected in November, took office in March. And that was about a 6-month period. During that 6-month period, from 1932 to 1933, President Roosevelt went to Florida to rest up for the presidency. He was down in Miami giving a speech, an impromptu speech in a park on the back of a car. And just as he sat back down into the chair, an assassin stepped from the crowd, jumped up on a bench, and began to fire at the president. His name was Giuseppe Zingarin. And the president was not injured. However, the mayor of Chicago was mortally injured that day. Now, I want to be very clear in pointing out that the mayor of Chicago was in Miami visiting with President-elect Roosevelt. That's how he was able to be shot. I said this to a school group one time, and one of the kids said, "Oh my God, what a great shot. You mean that Giuseppe Zingarin was in Miami and he was able to shoot the mayor of Chicago?" The mayor of Chicago was in Miami. Anyway, what happened was the mayor of Chicago passed away a couple of weeks later, and a policeman was shot along with that. And what they did was they took this bullet and the bullet was had wounded William Senat, a detective guarding FDR on his visit to Miami. And so when the bullet was removed, the detective said, "Oh, wouldn't that make a great gift for the president?" And so he gave that to the president. And this is actually on display in our museum. So if you want to get a close-up look at this, please come on down to the museum and you can take a look at this. And I'm sure it's one of those, there's a heartfelt note that went along with that. I'm sure, dear Mr. President, I want to please accept this from the bottom of my esophagus, because that's pretty much where it lodged. But anyway, a very thoughtful gift, right, to give that to the president there. Now, another icky gift is this one here, and this was given to the president. Okay, let's see if we can focus in on that. Oh, you're getting a little tour of the studio today. I don't know why the presets aren't working. Whoop, there we go. All right, so this is a little gift that was given to the president, and this is a small taxidermied alligator mounted on a round wooden base, and it has an inscribed brass plate attached to the bottom that says, "To the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt." Right? Yes, you probably knew that. From the Amphibious Force USN Landing Craft Pier 42 NYC, Lieutenant Commander Thomas W. Walsh, USNR, Officer in Charge, May 26, 1944. Now, somebody said to me, "Oh, is that an alligator?" That wasn't really given to a gift to the president. Somebody gave this to the president. Well, that's a crock. But no, it actually is an alligator. And we have a reproduction of that here, so you can see what it would look like in 3D. Okay, so this was put together by the folks down in the prop department. You can see the craftsmanship in that along the base there. And, the alligator, of course, chosen because alligators are very good amphibious fighters, right? They're good in the water, they're good on the land, and you don't want to mess with them, just like you don't want to mess with the amphibious forces of the United States. So that is a little gift from those folks there. Now let's take a look, and watch out, it's going to go to the ceiling again. Whoop, told you. Here we go, down to me. So next up, we have some gifts from famous folks. And some of these folks, depending on how old you are more famous than they would be if you tend to be kind of younger. So the first one we have here is a little badge that was given to the president. We have a blown up picture of it here from the Shirley Temple Police. And this badge was actually about this size. And this was given to the president as a gold tone bronze badge in the shape of an eagle-topped shield with a V-shaped laurel wreath. And this was labeled Shirley Temple Police. And this was given to the president by Director Alan Dwan, who created the Shirley Temple Police Force. And the reason for this was that during the filming of the film Heidi, there were a couple, quite a number of children on the set. And it was, in fact, Shirley Temple who was the one who was able to control the other children. So the director said, "All right, quiet on the set, get ready here, everybody, places, get on your blocks here." And they wouldn't listen. And then Shirley Temple would come in and say, "Okay, boys, come on, boys and girls, we got to get going." And they all listened to Shirley Temple. So she was kind of given this little, ceremonial title of Shirley Temple Police because she was able to keep peace on the set. So we have that in our collection as well. Next up is a movie cell. And let's focus in on that a little bit. So that one seems to work pretty good. There we go. And give that a moment to focus. And this is none other than our good pal, Mickey Mouse and Pluto. And this is a movie cell that was given to FDR by none other than Walt Disney. Now, you may remember Walt Disney went on to become a pretty famous and popular animator and amusement park creator and television personality and such. So this was given to the president. It is an original drawn and painted production cell from the movie Mickey Mouse. And he's dressed here as a hunter, and he's, of course, accompanied by Pluto. Pluto was at one time actually a planet, but now they've demoted it. So talk to your friends at NASA about that. And it was originally deposited in the Franklin D. Roosevelt Presidential Library in March of 1941, but it's dated here 1939. So we have that there in the collection as well. For those of you cowboy lovers, here is a picture of a set of spurs that had been given to the president by none other than Roy Rogers. And this happened around about 1943. This is a pair of decorated leather and silver spurs. Hand-tooled leather, worked silver on spurs, feature a flower and leaf designs. Okay, so you can kind of see those in there as well. And the way it works here is on one side there's a shrunken down cowboy, and then it's got FDR's initials here as well. So, you know, again, something that was given to the president by a famous person, and as admiration and, you know, thanks and support for the work that the president was doing for the country. Now let's shift over to some gifts of state. And the first one up is a little kind of stainless, leaded steel rather, I mean, stained glass medallion here. This is approximately 8¼ inches wide across here. And this is actually made up, it's an octagonal shaped relic from fragments of stained glass that were blown out of the palace at Westminster when the Germans attacked London. And the idea of this was that they went through, they picked up the bits and pieces of glass, and they made it into this, this beautiful window display here, catches the light. And this was, of course, given to the president by Britain's ambassador, and it is on display in our Preparing for War section and Hoping for Peace. So if you come to the library, you can see this in real live, you know, picture, not picture rather, but real life 3-dimension. And what's interesting about this, of course, is it's made of the shattered remnants of the Palace of Westminster, and yet it is put back together in a beautiful mosaic here. And of course, this is exactly the metaphor of what the Allied countries were looking to do with the Second World War, right? Okay, you know, if you want to go out there and, you know, blow people up and, you know, bomb countries and start wars, Hitler, well, that's up to you. But we are going to, you start this thing, we're going to finish it, and we're going to put the pieces back together that way. Now, there's a question in the chat, what makes this icky? I'm not sure which one they're talking about. If it's the bullet, it's the fact that it was removed from somebody to be given as a gift. That just strikes me as a little touch icky. Next up, we have a Moroccan dagger and scabbard. And this is the box that it came in. This is a beautiful box. And it is about 15 inches in length and about 4.5 inches wide. And if you open up that box, you will see a beautiful dagger like that on the inside. Okay. And, you know, this is really finely, you know, crafted design and things in here. And if you open up that little dagger and you take that out, it looks like this. Okay, so this is not your typical Thanksgiving or Easter carving knife. No way. This is a dagger given to the president on a trip to Morocco, along with Winston Churchill when they went there for the Casablanca conference during the war. So the Sultan of Morocco, Sidi Mohammed, presented this dagger to the president as a gift of friendship and welcome there to the conference. Okay, so some fancy stuff really in our collections as well, given to us from famous people. And the next one up is a picture of a rug. Now you might think, what? A picture of a rug? What's that all about? Well, this is the rug that is actually in the study of the president's office here in our museum. If you were to come to the museum, go to the president's study, you will see this carpet out on the ground there. This was a gift to President Roosevelt from the Shah of Iran. Yes, that Shah of Iran, the one that was removed from power in 1979. And this was given to him, again, as a gift of, to the president as a gift of friendship. And what's interesting about these Persian rugs is that a good Persian rug has about 100 knots to the square inch. So if you've got a piece of carpeting around about that big, you would have 100 knots tied in there in order to create the carpeting. And the knots were so small that they had to be tied by children. So what this rug represents is 10 years of child labor. And of course, Mrs. Roosevelt was none too happy about that when she found out that all that work had gone into this carpet. But nonetheless, it was a gift, from the Shah, a gift of state, and so FDR accepted it. And you can come and see it in our museum right here in Hyde Park. So here we go back to the ceiling probably. Oh, hey, what do you know? It worked that time. So next up, we're going to take a look at some gifts from ordinary, regular, old, everyday, average Americans. And just because these are coming from ordinary, everyday, ordinary, average Americans doesn't mean that these are ordinary, average gifts. Oh, but before we go any further, I want to show you one other gift from somebody famous. So when John F. Kennedy was at Harvard, he wrote his senior thesis, and he made it into a book. And the book was called While England Slept. And he gave a copy of the book to President Roosevelt. And it looks like this. On the inside cover of that book, he wrote on the inside here, let's see if we can get down here to come in closer. Oops. There we are. It's hard to make out, but it says, to President Roosevelt, with sincere regards, Jack Kennedy. So he gives this to the president in 1940. He, of course, is not the Jack Kennedy yet, right? He's just Jack Kennedy from the Kennedy family and, World War II, PT boat pilot eventually. And he is a senior at Harvard. Of course, FDR went to Harvard. And what's cool about this is FDR had this habit of writing his name and the year that he received books in the cover page here as well, or the flyleaf. So what's interesting about this is you have two presidential signatures in this one book. And, this guy is the current president, and this guy will, of course, one day be president. So that's kind of a neat thing you got there as well. So let's go over to the unusual gifts from ordinary people. And the first one up is this picture. And let me see if I can focus in on this just a touch. Okay, I assure you I have not been drinking. It's the technology here. If you look very closely, and it'll take a minute for this to focus in. This is a picture of FDR by Sidney Norman Cohen. And this is a black and white photograph print from a typewriter portrait. So what basically this guy has done is he has created the head and shoulders of the president entirely out of typewriter characters. And it shows FDR wearing a dark suit and jacket and a white shirt and a dark tie. So, this is very interesting. Imagine working on this. It took the guy over 2 years to create this. Part of the problem, of course, is, you've got to type everything out and then do all the the corrections and the layout and such. And apparently, if this were done today with spell check, every time you messed up, it would probably turn into a picture of President Hoover. But this guy, imagine, it's taking 2 years. Okay, that's some dedication there. 2 years to type that all out to become that beautiful portrait. Okay. Next up, we have a violin. This is a New Deal violin. You won't be able to see it very well, but this is just a picture of it from there. And this is a violin that has been specially handcrafted to include some Roosevelt features. So this is the what they call the scroll of the violin. And up here at the top of the scroll, there is usually just sort of a decorative scroll, literally, right? Looking like a sort of like a cinnamon bun from the side. But what this particular person did was they took that scroll and they crafted it into a picture of Franklin Roosevelt. So the scroll on this is actually a depiction of Franklin Roosevelt there on the top of that violin. So a one-of-a-kind item. You're not going to see that anyplace else, but you can come and see it here at the library. It's currently not out on display. On the back, he put in a portrait here of the United States Capitol. Okay, so that's on the back of the violin there as well. So very interesting when you think about what some of these folks are looking to do in giving these gifts to the president. Let's go back to a big shot for a minute here. Or I don't mean a big shot, I mean like a large shot. One of the things the president also liked to collect and were often given to him as gifts were things like this, ship models. So here is a ship model of the USS Samuel Adams. Again, Thursday, just thinking about it. And the president had somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 or 400 of these ship models in his collection. And you can see many of those on visible display. If you come to the library downstairs as you end up your visit, we have dozens of these on display, and you can get a sense of the wide variety of gifts of ship models that were given to the president. And one I think that you're going to find particularly interesting, especially those of you in the law enforcement industry, is this one here. Let me put this one here for you, and we'll focus in. This is a ship model. It's title of the ship. Let me get it in here, and then we'll focus it for you. The title of this ship is the Pardon Me. You know how boats always have names? This is called the Pardon Me. And what's interesting about this is this was made by an inmate in Sing Sing prison as a gift for President Roosevelt. And of course, the hidden agenda there is you give a boat by the name of Pardon Me, maybe there'll be a pardon coming out of this as gratitude of the president getting this gift. Well, I'm sorry, inmate 722-14, that's not going to happen, because the whole idea of this stuff is not to give gifts to get special treatment or to gain favor, but to give gifts simply for the love of giving a gift, the beauty and joy of that. This is pretty detailed. You can open it up. It's got some different parts and places it can open here. There's a drawer that comes out of the bottom down here, and there's actually a little motor in there as well. So very clever that it was titled that way. Very good craftsmanship. Perhaps if this person had put their work to their efforts toward this kind of work as opposed to criminality, maybe they would have been famous. But there's a little thing there from that as well. And you can see this actually on display in our in our gallery downstairs with the stuff that is not technically on display as an exhibit, but is visible storage. Now this one is the one that we get our title from our talk to, right? Don't look a gift horse, or you better look a gift Sphinx in the mouth. And this is a giant Sphinx sculpture. And this, if you were to stand next to it, is about 5 feet 8 inches tall or so. That's about the same height as me, by the way. And this is a very large paper mache head resembling FDR as the Egyptian Sphinx. And this came about in 1940. One of the big questions was, will FDR run for a fourth term? I'm sorry, a third term. And then, of course, he goes ahead and runs for the fourth term. So is he going to run for a third term? Well, there was no laws that prevented that. It was just political tradition. But the idea was that people generally didn't run for a third term, right? George Washington ran for 2. It was good enough for George Washington. Should be good enough for everybody. That was the thought. But like the great Sphinx of the Egyptian desert, keeping its mouth shut and its secrets to itself, that's what FDR was doing in 1940. So this is a papier-mâché sculpture. It's about 8 feet tall altogether with the base and such. And it was created as a humorous commentary on the president's prolonged refusal to say whether he was going to run for a fourth term. It was designed and constructed by James D. Preston, former superintendent of the Senate Press Gallery. And FDR was so delighted when he saw this sculpture that he had it shipped to the Roosevelt Presidential Library Museum, where it was put on display in 1941. And it was on display, I understand, for many, many decades. Then it was taken off display and was in storage. And when we redid our exhibits and our entire gallery, our big renovation, about 10 or 12 years ago, this was placed on permanent display, and it is simply so cool. Come down and take a look at it. I remember seeing this when I came to the museum as a little kid, years and years and years ago, and then it was off display for many, many years, but now you can come on down and take a look at that. It's pretty darn cool. Keep in mind that this was created as a goof for a one-night opportunity when the president was giving a speech, I believe, at the Gridiron Club. And so, this wasn't something this guy thought was going to be around 80 years later. If this had lasted, just the 5 or 6 hours of the dinner, that I'm sure would have been good enough for the guy. But this is some fine, probably some of the finest papier-mâché work in this country. So don't tell me we're falling behind other countries. We can still beat them in papier-mâché. All right. Now, next up, we have a gift and a reproduction of that. The president received many, many canes. As you know, the president had polio, and so it was difficult for him to walk. It was actually pretty much impossible for him to walk. He was able to do a sort of a small, short walk. We've got about 10 or 11 seconds of it on film. But generally speaking, the president was unable to walk. So people sent him canes of all different kinds and shapes and sizes and such. And we have over 100 canes in our collection. One that's particularly cool was a cane that's like this. And this is a infantile paralysis fund cane coin bank. And these came out around 1940 or so. In 1938, President Roosevelt created the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which later becomes the March of Dimes. And the idea of this was to help support finding funding for people with disabilities such as polio, to help them get the wheelchairs, the leg braces, those things that they needed. And then also, in addition, to try to come up with a cure or a vaccine. So the idea was to have these canes. These were made out of aluminum. They were hollow. And the cool thing about this is that you can take this cane, and back here is a little slot, and you could collect dimes. So you take your little dime and you put it in the slot right there, and you could collect up dimes. And when your cane was filled, you could send that money to help fight infantile paralysis. So that's a pretty cool thing, I think, in terms of gifts and such. Next up, we have a vest. And this is kind of a cool gift. Let me take this over here. Hold on, please. There we go. And let's see if we can get to our setting. Yes, we can. This is a vest that was created for the president in 1944, and it is a brown silk vest decorated with buttons, right? Just regular old ordinary buttons. And around the border are small white buttons. In the midway here are various sizes and colors of buttons. On the back of this vest, it said FDR 1944, also rendered in white buttons on the back of that. Luella Smith of Englewood, California, sent Franklin Roosevelt this handmade vest on January 3rd, 1944. So happens to be today is the anniversary of this vest coming to the president. And in a letter that accompanied her gift, she noted, "I want you to have your picture made in it and a photo sent to me to put on a stand so that I can admire my boy in the White House. I know you're busy, but it sure would make me happy." To the best of my knowledge, FDR was never photographed in this vest and sent to have a picture sent to the young woman. However, he did really appreciate it. And again, it'll give you an idea of the kinds of affection that people had for President Roosevelt. If you have ever had to sew a single button on a shirt or a pair of pants or a blouse or a dress, you know what a pain in the neck that can be. Now imagine putting hundreds of buttons on here. I don't know how many there are actually on there. I don't think anybody's ever counted, but we certainly know it's got to be in the hundreds. And, you know, you can do it for, once and see how difficult that is. Imagine doing it for hundreds and hundreds. The next gift up is, I think, one of the most magnificent that we have in our collection, both in its appearance and in its backstory. And this is a clock structure here. The clock is not an actual working mechanism, so that's just kind of a design. But what this is called the Chimes of Normandy. And this was given to the president by Ernestine Guerrero in 1935. It's made out of wood, metal, and fabric, but mostly wood. And the backstory of this is an elaborately carved wooden clock case made entirely out of wooden grocery boxes. The carving represents the facade of a church with 3 spires, 1, 2, 3, and has a non-working clock, which is another way of saying a non-working clock is that it tells the correct time twice a day. And on the back of the model is partially covered with wood. Now, a lot of people sent the president, homemade folk things and such, sent it to them. But this came from a young woman who sent it to the president in October of 1937. And the Guerrero family had received food assistance through the New Deal while her father was a carpenter struggling to find work. And it was the food that was sent to her family in the crates that this clock is made out of that kept the family from going under during that time. So the Chimes of Normandy, she used a kit pattern and wood that she salvaged from the grocery boxes provided to her family. And President Roosevelt was impressed with her gift, and it is now on display in the Roosevelt Presidential Library. So if you want to see this in real life, and you absolutely should, please come on down and take a look at that. Here is a copy of a news article where Ms. Guerrero is standing next to the clock that she gave to the president. And I want to read you the letter that accompanied this gift to the president. Here's what it looks like. So I'll read that to you. Let's go back to me. It says, "Dear sir, about 6 years ago, my father was helped by the relief organizations that you originated. I always saved the wood boxes in which the groceries came, for my father is a carpenter. He always said that we should be thankful to you for what we received. So one day I told him that I wished I could do something to show you our appreciation. And he said, Why don't you build something pretty out of those boxes for him? Okay, so dad is inspiring his daughter, and FDR is inspiring this with his relief organizations. I started making this from day one, day by day, for 1 year until I learned how. And then another year to finish. What I am sending you, the Chimes of Normandy, this is the best I have ever done in my life. And so she sends it to the president, right? I mean, that's a really, talk about giving something from the heart. But please accept and keep this piece of work from a poor girl that doesn't have anything. Also to show you how much we admire you, not only as President of the United States, but as a man of great ideals and a big heart toward humanity. Right? So there you go. That's wonderful in terms of that. So those are some of the gifts that from ordinary people and such. I forgot to show you this one. This is the president received from the South America a bunch of pottery and such that was done by the Incas and such. And so he has a collection of these, 25 of these in his collection as well. So it's things like cloth, like the vest. It's things like out of wood, like the clock. It's things out of ceramic, like this. Whoa. Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. These are just reproductions, right? These are just reproductions. What is a reproduction? Okay. What is this mean? All right, anyway. So I'm sure that was just a reproduction, nothing to worry about. Now, those are gifts that were given to the president. Let's take a quick look at the Roosevelts as gift givers. Now, Mrs. Roosevelt had this very cool idea, and I adopted this my own personal self about maybe, I don't know, 15 or 17 years ago or so. Mrs. Roosevelt believed that, giving gifts was a great sign of, friendship and, that somebody was thinking about you. And so what she would do is she would shop all throughout the year, and she would purchase up things as she saw them, bring them home, put them in her Christmas closet, and then at Christmas time, she had all of her shopping done. And that is so awesome, right? Don't you wish you'd known this a few weeks ago? Because what it does is it allowed her the opportunity to pick up great bargains throughout the year. It showed people that she was thinking about them all throughout the year because, she bought this, in July or whatever. And it freed her up from the hustle and bustle of the last minute shopping come holiday season. So I started this myself about, I'd say 15, 17 years ago or so. It's wonderful because you get to the 2 weeks before Christmas, all your shopping is done, right? I will say it didn't work that so well that 1 year that we got our kids the hamsters in June. But hey, there's, everything has got a little flaw. You got to just work it through. But it's a great, great idea. And so Mrs. Roosevelt would do that and put it in her Christmas closet. The president liked to give gifts as well, and the gifts that he gave generally tended to be quite practical. So, for example, this was a gift given in 1943. I'm sorry, 42. It says Christmas 1942 from FDR, and what this was a leather fold booklet. And then the idea was you to get this as a gift from the president, and on the inside, he would include a stamp page for collecting up stamps for the war effort. So you could purchase saving stamps, victory stamps, put them in here, and you'd have a nice little place, a commemorative place you could collect those. And, it was something nice for the president, and it gave you an opportunity and an excuse and a head start on collecting up stamps and things for the war. Another year, the president gave away something that looked like this. And this is a magnifier. So this is Christmas 1943 from FDR. And this was about 4 inches by 4 inches, leather around the outside, and a magnifier in the middle, so that you were able to read the fine print on things as you were getting gifts and letters and those sorts of things. So a nice little memento from the president kept there on the desk, and a memory from the president at the holiday time. Now, the Roosevelts kept very good detailed records of the gifts that they gave and the gifts that they received. They would just keep it on regular old yellow legal paper, and they would list this out. And what Mrs. Roosevelt would do would be she would have a name, she would have maybe who the children of that person were, the preferences that they had, sizes, birthday times, those sorts of things. So the idea was she was a very conscientious gift giver, and kept very good record of this. She didn't want anybody left out. She wanted to make sure the gifts that she gave were gifts that were going to be used and appreciated by the folks that got them. So as you're sitting there with, maybe 3 or 4 of those gifts, you just don't quite know what to do. Well, maybe you should start your own collection of unusual gifts, just like President Roosevelt did. Now, you may not have a vest made out of buttons. You may not have a stuffed alligator. You may not have a, million-year-old mastodon tooth. But, those back scratchers, those left-handed pot holders, those things that you got that you just don't quite know what to do with, why not turn them into an eclectic collection, just like Franklin Roosevelt did? It's just an idea. So let's open it up to any questions and answers that folks might have. Any questions or comments? I'm looking here in the chat. Let's see, when was this made? Was there a love of things Egyptian at the time? I think she's referring to the Sphinx, Nicole. And the idea of that was that there was a very famous political cartoon that showed the Sphinx, with FDR's face. And that Sphinx that I showed you the little picture of, the one that we have the big, 5 foot, 8 foot creation of in our museum, was actually sort of crafted based upon that political cartoon. And of course, the thing that underlies all of this is the president going to run for a third term? And there was no law against that. It was just political tradition up to that point. Every president since George Washington had served 2 terms and then passed it on to somebody else. But the question was, as we were getting toward the end of Franklin Roosevelt's first term, Adolf Hitler had just solidified his power in Europe and was beginning to get ready to start the Second World War. So Roosevelt wasn't necessarily thinking of, I just want to stay in power for the sake of staying in power. He had a very critical eye on what Hitler was doing in Europe. And he said, this may not be a good time to be breaking in a new president. One of the cool and eerie things of history is that Franklin Roosevelt and Adolf Hitler, right, good and evil, came to the world stage at almost precisely the same time. They came to power within 6 weeks of each other, and they died within 6 weeks of each other. So you had good and evil working back and forth all the way through this. So it wasn't just a vanity thing. It was a who might best be able to get us through this. And of course, President Roosevelt, thought that it would be him, given the fact that he had all this experience as the chief executive and also had been assistant secretary during the Second World War. So that's where that came from. Thank you, Zach. I try to have fun. Zach says, thank you for incorporating the comedy into the presentations. Keep in mind that these are all reproductions, so that vase that broke a minute ago was not actually a real live artifact. But I like to keep it fun because if it's fun, it's engaging. And if it's engaging, you can learn. And if you can learn, you can become a critical thinker. And if you could become a critical thinker, you will become a better attribute here to our society, because you are able to think of things and weigh out decisions and such, which is part of what we need to do through our civic engagement. Yes, FDR did have a habit of branding things with his initials. I don't have a copy of it here, but one of the things, I think one of the best things he ever gave away was after the Four Freedoms speech, he gave a really nice printed version of the Four Freedoms. I'm gonna have to see if I can find a copy of that. But I don't know if you know that I'm sorry, not the four freedoms. I keep saying four freedoms. Excuse me, I apologize. I meant to say that the D-Day prayer. He gave a nice, like, embossed version of the D-Day prayer, which in my way of thinking is one of the most beautiful pieces of presidential writing in all of history. Four freedoms, of course, are wonderful as well, but this particular one, really meaningful and poignant. So he did like to put FDR on things, but not, I don't think, to the same level that LBJ did. I mean, LBJ, everything had the LBJ on it. You know, bathrobes, toothbrushes, pencils, pens, you name it, it had the LBJ mark on it. But FDR liked to have his initials on things as well. And by the way, let me just tell you this. The term FDR, right, the initials FDR being his nickname, those were given to him by his father when he was born. He sent out the birth announcement, and it had a picture of a stork holding a little bundle, and on the little bundle, his father put FDR. A lot of people think that he picked that up once he began running for politics as a way to shorten his identifying name rather than Franklin Roosevelt, just as FDR. But it actually started right from when he was born with his dad. Did Mrs. Roosevelt receive any gifts of jewelry that she wore? Great question, Gail. One of the most prized pieces of jewelry that Mrs. Roosevelt had was a lion clawed necklace, brooch set. And this was her father went to Africa and shot a tiger and had the claws made into a necklace and also a little brooch. And this meant a lot to Mrs. Roosevelt. Of course, PETA, not exactly overjoyed with this, but it meant a lot to Mrs. Roosevelt because it was the gift from her father, and she idolized her father. And if you would like to see that, Gail, if you come to our presidential library, we actually have that on display. So that is a really important piece of jewelry, symbolically because of the relationship back and forth with Mrs. Roosevelt and her dad. Okay, so that's all we've got for this time out. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in. I'm looking forward to more of these presentations throughout 2024 and beyond. So thanks for coming in and tuning in. If you want to see some of the things that we've talked about here, please make a trip to the Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum in beautiful downtown Hyde Park, where you can see many of these things actually on display. And until then, we will see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.